This podcast is brought to you by the Prospect Research Institute, where researchers come to learn, innovate, and connect.
We really got to thinking about how can we categorize the portfolio so it's really accurately telling the story about who this prospect is and what is their real relationship with the university within the framework of their fundraising relationship. And it's a bigger picture than just one ask.
Welcome to Prospect Research Chat Bites, a podcast by and for prospect research professionals. I'm Jennifer Filla. Today, I'm talking with Sarah Cadbury, Executive Director of Prospect Development at Temple University and Vice President at Grenzebach Glier & Associates, also known affectionately as GG&A. Hello, Sarah. Thank you for joining me today on Chat Bites.
Hello, Jen. It's great to be with you today.
So before we dive into tracking a donor's relationship with our organization, I'm hoping that you'll share with us how you fell into the world of fundraising and what you're doing now.
Oh, it's always a great question to hear people's pathway. I started out doing a development associate type position at Sidwell Friends School and really had the opportunity to get my hands into all different aspects of fundraising. And I just really fell in love with getting the chance to do some prospect research for them and learning about the prospect tracking process, and decided that that was what I wanted to do. You know, an independent school didn't have the budget to have somebody doing that full time. So I was able to find a great opportunity working at National Parks Conservation Association. Also in DC, I worked at World Wildlife Fund. Then we decided to move back to Philadelphia, where we're from, to be with family. Worked at LaSalle University, and then was at Philadelphia Museum of Art for quite some time. And then in 2021, made the transition to Temple University. So that's my pathway on the full-time side. But then also, while I was at the Philadelphia Museum of Art, I was working very closely with the president of GG&A. And there came a point where she asked me to join the firm. So I'm doing part-time work with them, focused on prospect development. So working with clients on doing program reviews and a lot of work on building prospect policy documents, helping with that whole process.
Oh, that sounds like fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's great. So I know that you've been working on an interesting project at Temple, and it's all about separating the activity around a specific ask for a gift and the donor's overall relationship with the university. So it's sort of a nuance or a detail around prospect management and tracking. Can you tell me more about it? What are you doing?
You know, most organizations, when they're tracking prospects at the prospect level, they tend to use the solicitation status code. So just following that solicitation cycle, identification, qualification, cultivation. But that is then applied and conceptualized to be where the prospect is and who the prospect is. But I've always felt like that didn't make a lot of sense to me. I felt like there's more stories to tell about prospects than just that. Because most organizations hopefully are tracking that, but they're tracking it based on their entered planned proposals or plans or asks, whatever your various CRMs call it. But you're tracking that solicitation cycle. And maybe you even have multiple of these asks in place that are at different stages. So you run into all kinds of problems about, well, what's the appropriate code for this particular prospect, because we have two different ones. And so there's a challenge there. There's also a challenge around, it's a lot of data entry. So sometimes you're asking gift officers to update, make sure that their proposals are up to date, but then also asking them to do this separate update of the prospect status code. We all know that gift officers did not get into this because they want to spend their time doing updates in the database. Or as a workaround, sometimes some organizations will have their prospect development team just doing a lot of data entry. That doesn't make sense to me either, that we've got these really smart people just doing mundane tasks. But really, when it comes down to it, it's a question of, can we tell a different story? We were having a discussion amongst our team at Temple and just saying, we've got to do this differently. It's every time we do a portfolio review, it's, well, this isn't really what my portfolio composition is. It's not accurate. So it didn't make a lot of sense. And the other thing that we always find is that people also tend to have folks in their portfolios that are kind of those extras. They hold on to them. They need to be assigned. But even if you set a rule of you can only have people in your portfolio that you're working towards an ask for, every place I've ever been, they still are there. So we really got to thinking about how can we categorize the portfolio so it's really accurately telling the story about who this prospect is and what is their real relationship with the university within the framework of their fundraising relationship. And it's a bigger picture than just one ask. So the first sort of concept we developed was this idea of an active portfolio versus a maintenance portfolio. So we took some of those people like the permanent stewardship, the folks that are on the board of visitors that you have to have in your portfolio, you have light touches with, but they're never going to be the major gift prospects. We also have sort of a watch category that we call reclassify. So we separated those out and we consider them to be in our maintenance portfolio. But then the prospects that are in the active portfolio are really seen as those prospects that you are working towards engaging and working the engagement cycle. So trying to get ultimately to an ask. And so within that group, we just said we're going to break it down into 3 really simple categories. And it really is kind of a way of thinking about how mature is the relationship of this prospect to Temple in terms of funding proposals. So the most mature are the prospects we call established. So those are the donors that have funded a proposal within the last 5 years. It might be paying off pledges. They might have a new planned ask, but they have made that ultimate decision of funding at least one proposal within the last 5 years. Now, for those prospects that haven't yet funded a proposal in the last 5 years, but they might have an open proposal right now, or sometime in the last 3 years, somebody had an open proposal, but maybe something happened. It didn't come to fruition. It was declined, staffing change, it never was solicited. But at some point, somebody said they're ready, some point in the last 3 years, they're ready for an ask. So we consider that relationship to be developing. And then our third category, which is the least mature, are those prospects in discovery. So they haven't funded a proposal in the last 5 years, and they also have not had a proposal put on the system within the last 3. We went back and forth on the terms. I know for some people, the idea of discovery is about getting that first visit, but we were really thinking about this as the gift officer is going through the discovery process. They're getting to know the prospect. They're deciding what do they want to ask them for, what's the interest, how does everything align. So those were the 3 codes that we settled on. And as you'll notice, it doesn't have anything to do with meetings, right? So our traditional solicitation cycle sort of kicks off with identification, and then the getting that first meeting is the trigger for the change. We're only measuring proposals here. But so what we created was a separate rating code that measures the number of meetings or significant gift conversations. So that's one of the ways that we code our non-meeting interactions that are really around a gift conversation, just to sort of separate out those really important interactions that are happening from just the regular light touches. There are 4 codes. We have no relationship, means there has been no meeting. New relationship, there has been 1. Developing relationship is 2 to 5 meetings. And then if there's been more than 5 meetings or gift conversations, it's an existing relationship. And this is all measured within the last 5 years. So we do this 2 times. We will count those meetings and gift conversations done by the primary manager. So the primary manager knows how mature their relationship is with that individual prospect. And then we do it just as an overall. It doesn't matter who it was in the system. We're counting every single meeting and gift conversation. So that then you can also see how developed the relationship is overall. So there can be these advantages when you've got, a new portfolio who already has a strong existing relationship. I'm going to start there and then build out to those people who are a little more cold. They're pretty simple concepts and pretty easy to measure, and they're measured by automations. It just has to do with the gift officers. What are they putting in their proposals? What are they putting in on their contact reports? Nobody has to think about it. It's automatically calculated. And even though they're really simple, we're able to sort of look at them in a matrix and get some really interesting insight. So for example, who are the prospects that are in discovery that have developing or existing relationships? Okay, let's talk about this. Maybe it's time for them to have a proposal. I mentioned before looking for new assignments where there's an existing relationship, and then there's a need to deepen the personal relationship. So we've built some Tableau dashboards, and that has helped us to really click around and play around and talk with our gift officers in quarterly meetings about different ways to find these opportunities. Sometimes the opportunities are, oh yeah, I've met with them, but you know what? They're really not prospects. It's time to take them out. But that's great too. Like our portfolios have never been cleaner, but we're also trying to find those opportunities for the next ask.
I love the idea of separating the maintenance
Yeah.
portfolio and not blaming or shaming, right? Like we need to do it. We need to have them. Let's keep them. And then the idea of 3. So the 3 relationship categories makes sense. Like when I talk to major gift officers, a lot of times they don't think about some gift cycle or whatever, right? Like they're just thinking about what is my relationship with this person. And they'll describe it as, a new relationship or deepening the relationship or ready to ask, like we're moving along, which makes sense, like what you've done. I am fascinated that you have automated it so that no one has to count. If it's entered properly, then it automatically assigns. That is amazing. That sounds like a little more work than one might think, than the way it sounds. Like you had to code that, right?
Yeah, I mean, luckily we've got an information services team that was able to set up that coding. So I didn't have to worry about it myself. But it seems like it's an easy thing to code, but it did take a couple of tweaks along the way to make sure we were getting it right. But it's having it happen automatically. It's a big change. And for the gift officers, it did take a little bit of a mindset change. But the big sell, the entry through the door, was that they didn't have to do any of the coding anymore. That just saved them. And that was a great win.
Everybody loves that.
Yeah.
I love automations when they work well. The other thing I think is fascinating with what you've done is when you have turnover, and you will, or you grow your team, you already know that individual donor's relationship with your organization, irrespective of the person who is assigned to reach out and usher them through a deeper relationship. So if I come in new and someone's an established prospect, then I know we're already far ahead. I need to establish my rapport with that person, but they're much closer to a gift than someone who's in the discovery or newer to the organization.
It gives you really great opportunities to segment the portfolio and be able to think about these groups distinctively. And even within the developing, those examples of maybe there's not an active proposal right now, but somebody thought that there should be. So once you've gotten to know you're established, developing is the next great place to look, because there was something happening here and you don't want it to get too cold. It gives gift officers opportunities to look for themes and structure their work around that.
That's a beautiful thing. What are the outcomes so far? How long has this been going on?
So we went live with it the summer of 2022. We've had it for a year, but we've gotten lots of really good feedback. We've had some people say, I've always sort of thought about my portfolio in this structure, but I've never been able to see it mapped out this way for me. And we've been having regular quarterly reviews. We've got other gift officers who are saying just like, I really need this time to step back from, I get absorbed in the day-to-day, what do I need to do? And this helps me to step back and see my portfolio overall. So it's been really, really helpful that way. One of the impacts that we've seen is that portfolios have gotten smaller and more focused. So we've been able to take out, a lot of those names that are just sitting around being held just because people don't like to let go of relationships, but it's enabled us to get cleaner portfolios. It's also resulted in better saturation in terms of the percentage of the portfolio that's getting contact. We're seeing, one, by having cleaner portfolios, there's more outreach. And we did actually build on, in addition to the Tableau report with the portfolio composition, a report that was about portfolio saturation. So people can pick a time frame and see the percent of their portfolio that's gotten contact. They can click on the little gray box of their prospects that haven't gotten contact. And then what I love about that is there's, it's tactical. They have steps. So all of this is hopefully driving towards activity.
That's true. If there's no activity, there probably won't be much giving.
Right.
Before I let you go, do you have any key tips or any resources if someone wants to make this kind of change at their organization?
Oh, it's a great question. I mean, certainly getting a sense of what are some of the priorities for your organization? What are some of the challenges? And who are your allies in this? What's the capability of your information services group? We started with a deep dive meeting for our team, and then we brought in others. I think one mistake that we made was actually not doing more bringing in our end users. So for example, I think that we wouldn't have used the term no relationship because we're finding that that's something that the gift officers sort of chafe at. So definitely would recommend making sure that you're including your users before you roll out, just because sometimes there's things you don't think about how people might react.
I find the words that I use as a researcher or thinking about data and systems is often very different from someone who's building a relationship with actual human beings. So I'm not surprised that there would be some things along the way. That just seems normal.
Yeah, and there's also always the challenge that there's a perception that prospect development is judging the work of their peers, and it can be particularly challenging because there's a sense of, well, you're not doing what I do, you don't understand. So one of the things that I wanted to do is actually also have for the team a way to talk about portfolios that wasn't about performance. So it wasn't how are they doing with their metrics. It was about finding opportunities and doing analysis into the portfolio in a way that a gift officer can understand. So that was one of the really interesting things to do, and trying to tackle that challenge of language differences, the cultural divide between prospect research, prospect management, and gift officers. And I think it really has resulted in stronger relationships on our team.
That's fabulous. Thank you so much for sharing today, Sarah.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
That was Sarah Cadbury, Executive Director of Prospect Development at Temple University and Vice President at GG+A. Did you like hearing about the innovations she's making in prospect management? Well, then go on and connect with her on LinkedIn. I've put the link right inside the show notes to make it easy for you.